I don't forget. There we go. Namaste, guys. And where's my screen sharing? Here it is. And so on to Ardra Nakshatra. What do I do here? Well, I just got to figure out how to use my computer again. Back happening. Oh, no. That's not the button. That's not the button.
I've just my Twitter.
I lost my screen with all you guys on it, so I'm trying to find it again. How do I do this? How does this work? Anyways, I'll go with that, I guess. That's how it is how it is. So there you go, Ardra Nakshatra. I really like Ardra Nakshatra. It's the wild one. It's the Rudra. It's the tribal nakshatra. I think, I'm not sure. I just came to my mind today when I was kind of looking at it, but I think Ardra is probably the most outcast nakshatra. Ruled by Rahu, who's of course the outcast. Hey, Emmett.
Yeah.
You mind muting your volume? There's a bit of, I think it's from here. There's a bit of noise coming in. Thanks, man. So we get Rudra or Ardra Nakshatra. It's ruled by Rudra. It's ruled by Rahu. And I think it's probably, like I said, I think it's probably the most outcast of them all. The sexual animal for Ardra is the dog. And that seems to really describe a lot about Ardra. This kind of, I think it's even the female dog. Yeah, the female dog. So it's kind of, and the Ardras can get very, very sort of excited, like a bitch in heat in a sense, just like a female dog. And they have well, they call it the moist one, the fresh, the green, kind of like that. So a lot of those sort of springtime themes come in, but actually it has a lot to do with like wailing, crying. And so Ardras tend to end up crying a lot. They have a lot of sort of catastrophes in their life. They have a lot of kind of big changes go on in life. But the thing is, it's actually Ardra is one of these people. It's probably the best people to start crying, because after they cry, they feel very fresh. They feel very cleansed. They feel, right. It's like that. Ardra is kind of like that sort of moment right after the storm is hit. And so you get that big sort of Rudra storm. And then you get this freshness, this clear, clean green in a sense, right? And so Rudra, I don't know if you guys know Rudra. So Rudra is another name for Shiva. And well, when I meet some of these bush guys in Canada, I call them Rudra. Rudra is kind of more the bush, the jungle version of Shiva. And they say that he's the howler. Rudra is known as the Lord of Beasts. There it is. But the howler is there. And so actually you find a lot of Ardras relating with singing. And I bet some Ardras, he had a lot of placements in Ardra. We'll probably see his chart down below. But he was doing this kind of Moroccan throat singing. And a really weird sort of, the air comes up, but you push all the energy down, it kind of pops your throat. You get really crazy sounds, really strange things come out. So that's sort of Rudra as well. The singing and all of that. Now, sorry, I got a couple words are like ardent and arduous, and yeah, these sort of things really sort of represent Rudra. Like usually people with Ardra placements, it's a hard road. It's tough. They got to really work, and they're going to suffer quite a bit. That sort of thing. But then you can see one of the main symbols, the diamond. It's kind of like Ardras are like these diamond in the rough kind of characters in a sense, right? They're maybe really rough, sort of bushy people, but they have some, I guess maybe it's a redeeming quality, right? They're the outcasts, but they have some redeeming quality, something that's kind of special about them somehow. Now the tree is pepper. It's long pepper, but it's basically just pepper. Anything like, I think Ardra really also relates like the sneeze, that, that howl almost, that, well, Rudra, I should say this about Rudra. So we think of the pranavayus, right? To talk about, they usually talk about 5 pranavayus, sometimes 10 pranavayus. But Rudra rides on the pranavayus. And so Rudra, this is why we pray to Shiva. The pranavayu is basically our air in a sense, right? The prana, the breath. And so Rudra is the one riding on the breath from heaven to earth. And Rudra, well, if he's Shiva, then that's where we get our power from. That's the sort of spirit that comes in from heaven and enlivens and enlightens the body. And so that's kind of Rudra. But it's again, it's a very harsh nakshatra. It's got that female dog aspect. So sexually, usually like Ardras can be very sort of ardent when it comes to sex. If they want someone or they want something, they can really be like that dog and go quite direct. We'll go down, say more about the dog down below. But you can see the rulerships, and I didn't come up with these are from classical texts, right? So murderers, animal catchers, liars, adulterers, thieves, rogues, creators of discord, cruel people, charmers, sorcerers, right? Well versed in the art of raising goblins. So that's Ardra. They're usually some black magic is often involved with what they're doing. That kind of thing. You can see washermen, dryers, thieves, that sort of stuff. They suffer when Saturn's in Ardra. He's obviously it's a very destructive energy, so breaking things, tearing, losing, losses, all that sort of things that Shiva excels at. The sage here is Pulaha, and he's the guy who made all the mystical beasts, all the beasts in the forest and that kind of stuff. And so again, that connection with animals will come through very strong with Ardra. A lot of times you'll have a dog or something. They're usually really, really good with animals, Ardra people. Again, it's that sort of bush connection with the forest, the lord of the beasts, that sort of thing. Can see some of his, I'll let you kind of read that over. Ardra is, like I said, he's human, but all too human. And so they always want to do what's best. They kind of want to rise to that higher position of being like a deva, but usually something their desires, or a lot of Ardras have some kind of addictive tendencies as well that we'll see later on. So there's something that always often kind of knocks them off that kind of achieving the deva position, you could say. As a butcher, so Ardras often do like all the harshest jobs, you could say. Butcher is, well, it's one of the outcasts sort of castes in India, is the butcher caste, because they're dealing with flesh, they're dealing with meat, they're killing things. And actually, sometimes you might see these days, you might see actually surgeons by this category would also belong to the butcher caste. Surgeons are interesting. We think of surgeons, oh, that's the top job. Like nobody, it's like the highest job you can almost get is to become a surgeon. But in India, the surgeons they're kind of outcast Brahmins. So they're educated, they're knowledgeable. They're kind of following scripture, but as long as they're kind of cutting open bodies and dealing with that thing, they're kind of considered butchers. Motivated by kama, by desires. Very hard, sharp sort of nakshatra. We'll go into that a little bit further down. Tamasic. When we look at these, it's like there's not, like Ardra is pretty harsh, right? It's destructive. It's just human. It's a butcher. It chases after its desires. Hard, sharp, cutting. Tamasic. All of these things. It's quite what can you say? Quite a harsh nakshatra, really. And so it's also Vata on the air. And so air is actually very important with our Ardra nakshatra, the wind, the air, that sort of storm that's coming through. And so female, it's like a fresh, green, moist, like young feminine sort of energy there as well. So I've already mentioned this bitch and heat sort of sense of Ardra. And that's like when Ardra wants something, they just go for it, right? They're just really, I'd say meditation and yoga might be a little more difficult for, or classical yoga might be more difficult for Ardra. And they're more likely to get more involved with sort of black magic and sorcery and some of the darker sides to mysticism in a sense. I mentioned, oh, here we go, here we go. So I mentioned the long pepper. You can kind of read that there. It's usually an addition in a lot of Ayurvedic stuff. When I have a cough or something, they'll put a little pepper in my tea, that sort of thing. The agate wood, the eagle wood is very interesting because it's where is it? Yeah, it's one of the most expensive raw materials in the world, like $100 to $10,000 a kilogram. And it's this tree sap. It's really, really popular in Arab countries because it's kind of an aphrodisiac. It's a musk sort of thing. I think I described the sound, yeah, or the smell down here. Oriental, woody, very soft, fruity, floral. That sort of thing. Exhilarating, spiritually elevating. Um, and so it's quite a nice fragrance. I listed some of the other popular fragrances there as well. This is the planning of the transits. This is when moon is kind of passing through Ardra. And mostly this connects with like the hard, sharp sort of activities where the moon is passing. We kind of look at this. What the heck is it? Yeah, the kind of general nature of the nakshatra is mostly what sort of guides the day when the moon is in there. But this is like oftentimes on Ardra days are really good days to do things you've been putting off because they're not nice things to do. You don't want to do it. And so eventually they have to get done. So you find a day when the moon is passing through Ardra and you clean the grease trap, or you whatever, you fire people that you didn't want to fire, or you put down the dog that you didn't want to put down, or just a lot of these sort of harsh activities can be performed when moon is in Ardra. So here I mentioned the 5 vayus, the prana vayus, and so here they are, nice little diagram of them. And so Rudra's riding on these prana vayus. If we think of, well, the word prana vayus, it's not exactly prana, it's prana vayu. It's a little bit, the vayu is the wind and the prana is like the energy, the power that's in the wind. So Rudra is very much connected to that power that's in all of these airs that are going through us. Kind of like the acupuncture meridians and all of that is kind of energy just flowing. He's also, well, this is part of, well, it's down below, but this is part of Orion, the constellation, which in the West they call the Hunter. And so there's the Hunter, and then there's his dog right beside him, Sirius. And so Sirius is probably the main star for this. I mentioned, well, there's 11 Rudras. And so they talk about the 5 Karmendriyas and the 5 Jnanendriyas and the mind. It's like the mind is like the main Rudra, it's Shiva. And the other 10 are kind of, they call them Maruts. Are kind of Shiva's, they kind of picture them as these little goblins that kind of go and do Shiva's bidding. Which is kind of, in a way, you could say like our senses are these little goblins that run out and get what they want, kind of fulfill their desires in a sense. I'll read this out because it's kind of nice. I bow to that Rudra, who's the terrible, the eminent, the extremely strong, who is the highest Lord, the one who is ever unborn and whole, who is the brightness of a million suns, the one who holds the trident in his hand, the weapons that uproot the bondage of the 3 gunas, Sattvic, Tamas, Rajas. I bow to you, O husband of Bhavani Devi, who can be attained by devotion. And so that's from the Rudrakshatam, which is there's a whole series of songs in India called the Ashtaks, the sort of 8 verses. So this is the 8 verses to Rudra, or a part of it anyways. And so we see that rain and teardrop and stuff like that just down below. Just maybe put that together. But down below I listed, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of tears actually, and depending on why we cry will actually determine the chemical makeup of the tears, which is quite interesting actually. And so you also get this human head here. And so actually a lot of modern tantra kind of comes from the kapalikas, and these are the skull carriers. And modern days it's like the naga babus and the agwas kind of carry the skulls. The agros will always have the skulls around their neck, just beads or something like that, but they'll often have a skull as a kind of their alms bowl and that sort of thing. I was in it's just before lockdown, days before lockdown, I did a big festival on cremation ground, and in the day we throw the ash of the bodies on each other and party and sing and dance and go and celebrate with all the dead and all the ghosts and goblins and all the fires where they're burning people. And then at night they do it's actually they bring some prostitutes in, and the prostitutes do the ritual and the kind of the prayer in the temple. And then afterwards all the agros fill their skulls with whiskey and sort of pass that around. And it's a very Ardra sort of a festival in a lot of ways, because it's sort of that death and destruction and celebrating that. It's like we sort of take the part of Shiva dancing on the cremation ground, quite literally in a way. So Shiva also, Rudra was the one when Rama was chasing after his daughter. It was Rudra, the hunter, who came out with his bow and shot Rama in the thigh. Right, and so that goes back. We can see how the story sort of plays out to Rohini and Mrigashirsha and Ardra, this story of Brahma chasing after his daughter. But Shiva's also the one he cut off one of Brahma's heads when Brahma lied to him. And that was, I don't know if you know that story. Brahma and Vishnu were arguing over who was more powerful. And then Shiva came walking along, right? She was like, "You guys are crazy, man. You can't even find the end of me." And he turned into the shaft of light, Shivalinga, a Jyotilinga, 12 Jyotilingas in India. And so he turned into the shaft of light. They said, "See if you can find the end of me." And so Brahma got on his swan and went up, and Vishnu got on the swan and went up, and Brahma went on his boar and went down. And they couldn't find the end of him, but Brahma ran into this little flower as he was going up, and this little flower was kind of floating down. Ketuki flower, I think it's called. Anyways, and so he asked the flower, he's like, "So how much further up is it?" And the Ketuki's like, "Oh, I have no idea." And so he made a deal with this Ketuki flower. He said, "Well, you lie for me, and we'll go down and we'll tell everybody that I found the end of Shiva, and then everybody will think I'm the most powerful." And so they did that. This little flower told the lie for him, and of course Shiva knew right away. Everybody, like, Shiva's like, "There is no end to me," so you couldn't have found it, right? So he chopped off his head and said, "Nobody's ever going to pray for you in India. That's it. You're done being a god." And Brahma, of course, he's a god, and he begged him, and he said, "You have to." And so Shiva said, "Okay, you can have one temple." And so he gave him one temple in Pushkar, and that's why Pushkar is so famous. If you're ever, you go to these festivals, and there's always someone selling a whole bunch of like Indian fabric, Indian clothes, kind of these kind of cheap silk. Sometimes it's actually really high quality silk, but they get it for nothing. A lot of those people that are selling at those festivals, they buy everything in Pushkar. So it's just a little aside there. Diamonds are interesting, right? The diamonds relating with Rudra, that hard, sharp cutting, but it's also that, like the Ardras, they suffer. They feel a lot of pressure on them a lot of times. And so this pressure and dealing with this pressure, well, it makes them hard, but it also makes them that diamond in the rough. They learn a lot from that. Seems like everybody's got a bad connection. Emmett's coming in and out too. So the diamond, they become that diamond in the rough, right? Just from dealing with so much pressure and so much stress in life, that they kind of get squeezed into this really beautiful, lovely diamond. And so there's some other sort of things there. There was a demon, Balasur, and he sort of defeated Indra and the rest of the gods at some point. Yeah, I think this is where Indra, where the heck is it? Indra came in. Anyways, this god, he became all the gems of the world. And so when Indra finally defeated him, there it is. Indra escaped and defeated him. He set the diamonds sort of free. And so the diamonds and the all the gems and the rubies, and there's a lot of this sort of stuff in India, all these precious metal or precious stones in India. And those are all fall from Balasur, sort of an idea. Well, just kind of skipping through this so we can get, I want to look at some charts today if we can get down that far. Um, so the top and the back of the head. And so this section, in a way, this is just kind of early research because I haven't really gone into the people and just see how these things are affected. But there's certain parts of the brain that are very much seem to be very much connected to the Rudra sense. Hey, Emmett, do you want to put yourself on mute again? There's kind of a static coming through. Thanks. So you get the somatosensory cortex, which is kind of in the back of the top of the head. Apparently, it's not on my picture, but it relates with a lot of these sort of things that Rudra relates with, the sense of touch, the pressure, feeling the vibration. It's all that sort of sensory stuff we feel on the skin, right? When we itch or we tingle or pain and all of that sort of stuff. It also has a lot to do with the way we move. And this is kind of, it's good to kind of know these three, I have three functions, but I only have two lists. No, there's three. So these are kind of good to know these, or proprioception, that awareness of the position of the movement of the body. They do that sometimes. There's some yoga schools that really focus on proprioception and that awareness. And so it's these really sort of slow movements. In a sense, if we think of something like walking meditation, the whole point of that is to move very slow and just always be so aware of the position of your body and how your body is moving. And so that's kind of proprioception, again, quite important for yoga practices. And so the exteroception, that's more the awareness. Again, awareness is very yogic, right? But the exteroception, that's awareness of kind of just your where you are in space, kind of thing, like the things that are around you. You know, you kind of, oh, I'm this far from the wall and I'm not far from that thing. And right, I got my eyes closed, but I know my laptop is just here, sort of thing. You know, these different things. So that's the exteroception. And interoception is the more that sense of the internal of the body. I used to, well before I ever did yoga or martial arts or anything like this, I used to watch a lot of these sort of ninja movies and stuff. I was all big into that. I remember thinking, like, it must be possible to be completely aware of your body and your internal organs. And so say when you eat, to actually be aware and sort of feel that food as it goes through your digestive tract and sort of become aware of the internal states of the body. Now that's a little bit more than interoception, but I do think we can get there. We can be just hyper aware of what's happening inside the body. So parietal lobe, there we go. That's kind of top and back very much in the picture here. The red, the pink, I guess. And so that's where we get a lot of our sense of identity from this. It's and we get that sense of identity from our senses in a way. Like I was talking in this class yesterday about Venus, and well, I was talking about like when you're making love and you really sort of let go and you release and you sort of let you allow yourself to sort of enter the other person in a sense and sort of experience the world from their perception for a really, really good relationship. That's what you want to do. And well, with anyone, if you want to see what they're saying or understand what they're saying, you got to stop and you got to look at the world through their eyes. And this is really, really important thing to do these days because politics and things like that is becoming so polarized. Everything's just moving out to the poles, and nobody wants to kind of stop and see the world through the other person's eyes. Because a lot of times when we do that, we kind of see that, okay, well, they actually have a point. even though it's like completely opposite what your point is. And it doesn't mean you don't have a point, but it's like, oh wow, actually my enemy also has a point. And we don't really want to deal with that too much. And I think Ardras kind of do deal with that sort of thing. I mentioned some other things. Again, this is sort of theory, but it's matches with Shiva. It matches with Ardra, a lot of this stuff. So the occipital lobe, this is the information from the eyes. Well, this is one of the main areas, actually. We think our prana is just in the breath, but it's the prana that's going out through all the senses. And I think the eyes is probably the most powerful one. And a lot of the most prana gets exhausted through the eyes. And so this is what's actually one of the things that's really exhausting when you travel, actually, because you're in a new place and so you don't know anything. And so your eyes are kind of seeing everything and you've got to kind of register everything, even if you don't really comes to your conscious awareness, but you're kind of think about everything. What is that? Oh, and that, and that. But when you're at home or you're in your home area, you don't have to think about anything. Your brain already knows what everything is around you. And so you hardly even see it anymore, right? It's like you're at home and you lose your keys and you look for an hour and there they are sitting on the darn table. It's just because you're so used to them on the table, you just don't even see them anymore. And so there's a lot of prana on that kind of goes out through the eyes, controlled by the occipital lobe. Things like, I'm pretty sure something like dyslexia would be related with Ardra. Maybe also some other sort of learning disabilities might be related with Ardra. That way. We can see here's the three different kinds of tiers. I think when I looked this up, it's been a while now since I did the research, but I think you can find lists of like 6 or 10 different kinds of tiers here. There's quite a bit going on with our cry, right? It's this, like the basal tears are just normal, just the moisture in the eye. The reflex tears, as you can see, something gets in there and you kind of go like that. And then you got all these emotional tears. And there's actually, did I do it? No, I didn't do it. I should add that in because it's actually very important maybe for healers or people that were working with people. We should know more about the way people cry because it often gives some hints even. Sometimes people are sort of lying to us in a way. And so when someone's lying to you and they start to cry, there's kind of a way you can sort of tell that by the way they're breathing and the way they're crying. But or one of you guys can look that up for me if you want and send it over. But that's a little more research maybe needs to be done on Ardra that way. Okay, here's the stars. I mentioned the Sirius, the dog star, the dog tooth, Canis Major, and Bategules. Bategules is also actually a very important star. It doesn't, it's maybe not as famous as the dog star, but it's one of those giant red planets. A little bit similar to Rohini in a way, right? Rohini is that red eye of the bull, and so here we got another red one. And these are both in Ardra. Well, Sirius is kind of part of Ardra, but the dog, I think it's probably a separate constellation from Ardra. So this is kind of right on, or from Orion. And so this is kind of right on the cusp of Orion and Sirius in a sense. Now, I won't go through this too much. You can kind of read this on your own. And I've mentioned a lot of this, the storm, the jungles, the outcasts, hunters, trainers, choppers, cowboys, all these sort of things like this. Really good for guides, anybody working out in the forest, police officers doing undercover work. Ardra is really good at like research and really kind of digging deep into things. Meghnad also has that curiosity for research, you could say. Ardra might be doing a little harsher research, right? Like dissecting bodies or these kind of, what can you say, less acceptable or less comfortable kinds of research. Adrenaline junkies and thrill seekers, right? That kind of research. you go in there and you go into those places where other people don't want to go, where your adrenaline's going to get up, thrill seekers, all of that. A lot of music. I talked about being singers, but excellent dancers, right? The whole tribal trance dance sort of thing. That's so Ardra, that animal magnetism, that getting mesmerized sort of by the beat and that sort of thing. Really, really Ardra. They're always very physically fit, very active sort of people. Usually very good instincts as well, like a dog, right? You can kind of, the dog knows. Negative Shirsha is also connected with the nose, but I think Ardra has some connection as well with the nose. Because the nose kind of gets into things like that. They often deal with, here it is, drugs and sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? The booze and bartenders and a lot of that sort of thing. He's all tribal, so we all know shamanism is going to be attached to that. Blood sacrifices get taught in Ardra. A lot of really sort of harsh things are here. Games, strategy games. The mind is really, they usually have a really sharp mind, Ardra people. But a lot of times they're not, they won't have a high education. Again, that's sort of diamond in the rough. That like that old hillbilly, you think he's kind of an idiot, and then you're like, oh wow, actually, wow, he could kind of smart, he knows something. So these kind of things, they've got something special there. Like that. Yeah, I mentioned here this free will advocates. It's a very, very free will. In a way, you could think of Ardra as a little bit like the lone wolf, right? Or the howling wolf as well. That kind of wild animal. So it's interesting. We were back at Rohini. It was represented by the cow or the buffalo, very domestic animal, anyways. And then we went to Migrashirsha, which was the deer, which is a wild animal, but a tame, like a gentle one, sort of thing. And then we get to Ardra, and it's like that full wildness coming out now through Ardra. Yeah, more about Agor and dark devil worship, heterodox, all of that sort of stuff. These are the ones like, I see this a little bit, Ardra and Ashlesha that we'll get to later on. A lot of these people that were administering like ayahuasca ceremonies and that sort of different things, they all had a lot of like strong Ardra and strong Ashlesha placements, like kind of dealing with the drugs, but on a spiritual level sort of thing. And so, well, that's that outcast, right? Like that's kind of, tribalism is kind of an outcast religion in a sense. And so all those sorts of things. And so these are just general things about the planets, Rahu, Mercury, how they sort of blend together. Again, can be good for commercial businesses, small businesses doing that on their own. Again, that lone wolf thing comes in. So even in their work, they often like to work alone or be alone somehow. Now, here's what's his Ardra placement? Oh, so this is Einstein's chart. You want to talk about good for research? Here's an Ardra ascendant. Um, I haven't, anyways, whether the ascendant degree is correct, right? Because that's gonna change quite a bit. Like with every minute of change, the ascendant degree will change. But here we get, yeah, we get Albert Einstein as an Ardra ascendant. So he was kind of a bit of a, well, he was kind of the Socrates figure in academia. He was a bit of an outcast in academia, doing his own thing, and kind of nobody could understand him, I think was part of it. But he also, I don't know if it was Ardra. I want to think maybe he was actually Migrashirsha in a way, because the way he talked about coming to his ideas was it came from God. It almost came from a voice. It came from a dream. And that's why Einstein was so brilliant, because he knew how to listen to his dreams in a sense. we'll go through a lot of these placements later on, but the thing that make Albert Einstein's chart so famous is he's got the debilitated Mercury. And it's like, what the hell is the smartest guy in the world doing with the debilitated Mercury? But then we see that it's with Venus. And so it's getting a reversal of the debilitation because of Venus. But we also see it's in Jupiter's sign of Pisces. And Jupiter's coming into the 9th house of Aquarius, ruled by Saturn, and Saturn's coming into Jupiter's house. So there's an exchange between Saturn and Jupiter, and there's a reversal of debilitation by Venus. And we talked about the way he came to his ideas. Well, this is all Pisces. This is all kind of coming from his dreams, coming from his fantasies. And he was able, probably because Saturn's there, able to make these things into a kind of reality. But it was also very harsh, right? He's got Ketu is aspecting Saturn in his 10th house, and he's got Mars and Rahu together in his 8th house. And well, this is the guy that made the nuke, right? And so you've got, well, Mars and Rahu very explosive. You've got Ardra making a lot of noise, like a big roar kind of thing. And so he kind of gets identified with a lot of that stuff. As far as research physics sort of went, he also caused a major stir, so almost a war, you could say, in that regards. Now, here's another chart, very rich Ardra. You can see he actually inherited his fortune from an uncle. It wasn't through his own family, but Maurice the Rothschild. So it was another Rothschild. Amishal, I think, is the one who really, well, in modern times anyway, got things going. But we see here another Ardra figure. And he was undertaking these zoological expeditions. So that connection with animals coming in, even with someone like Maurice de Rothschild. So very connected that way to animals. Maybe because the Mercury is in 12th and Ketu and all this. Maybe he was really interested in, well, he was, I don't know, he traveled to Africa. And so, well, from his perspective, a guy from France going to Africa, he was documenting and collecting specimens that were really strange, really out there, really odd, like little fantasy creatures in a sense. And so, and you can read some of this about the Ardra Gemini there as well. There's always something fascinating about Ardra. Any of the Rahu Nakshatras, there's something so fascinating about this. So again, they might be an outcast, but people are still going to be like, there's something magnetic about them in a sense. People will just be attracted to them. They'll just be drawn to them somehow. And so that has a lot to do with the Ardra, the Rahu part of Ardra. We can see here, again, this is the ascendant in Ardra, and so it's kind of tough to deal with. But we get someone like Hillary Clinton. I should check this because I recently rectified her chart a little bit, so I'm not sure if that's straight, but probably is. So Hillary Clinton, China, I don't know if you know her. She was a big one of these female wrestlers in WWF many years ago. I think she actually ended up dying from like a steroid overdose or something like this. You get Madonna, of course, very sort of a singer, but very Rudra sort of character as well. Sydney Watson, I think she has a what do you call it? Like a YouTube channel sort of thing, and she gives all this commentary on the news and kind of stuff. Sometimes it's kind of funny. It's all right. You can see Sonny Liston, boxer. Sonny Liston was the most brutal of all the boxers. Like he had this reputation. He was like kind of a mob enforcer. So he's just brutal, man. Kurt Russell. Is it Kurt Russell that's just going to Cardiacs and Rust? He shot that guy by accident. Is that Kurt Russell? Or somebody else? Yeah, nobody watches movies. None of my friends watch movies apparently. I remember in India, some like big time famous actor was there, and we all had it wrong. We all thought he was somebody else. It was really good. I think it was Morgan Freeman, it turned out to be. And so we'll see some pictures of the volcano down below, but I've got the Guatemala volcano. And I think probably actually a lot of volcanoes might be a little bit sensitive to Ardra placements. Might be more when you got like a Mars or something like that, because of course every day there's a Ardra ascendant, right? So we don't have a volcano every day. And so some other planets, but we'll see in some of the pictures when you see these volcanoes exploding and these streams of light coming up, it's really cool. It looks like Shiva's jata, like Shiva's dreadlocks, kind of pouring out of this volcano. And of course, when volcanoes do that, there's a heck of a roar as well. Who else do we got here? Well, this is a little bit similar to China. You got Andy Hug, who's down here. He was a kickboxer. I think he mostly made his fame in Japan. And he also died very, very early. I don't think they reported it because of drugs, but I have a sense that steroids he might have also been using steroids and it weakened his heart, kind of thing. Now, a couple women here I know, like Adi B. I'm gonna go see her next week. Actually, she's kind of living out in the country, teaches Tantra, very, very connected with Shiva as well. Really strong Shiva devotee. Adi SS, Adi Shankar Sharma. She's an Indian girl. She collects these, she does a beautiful job of it, but she basically collects like sticks and stones and feathers and has quite a large collection, but she's also involved with sort of cataloging. She works with a nature photographer. And so she's involved in cataloging a lot of this nature photography stuff. So again, that connection with animals kind of sort of comes in some different ways in some of these charts. The country of Turkey, it's listed as having an Ardra.
My friend Ian.
Pardon me?
My friend Ian, he's there.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah.
It's funny because you were talking about it and I was like, I feel like he has Ardra, like something. And I looked it up and I was like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so there he is, Ian Scriven. And so yeah, he's a wild man. He's got the jata and the dreadlock sort of thing as well. How is he with animals?
He loves animals. He loves animals. He was working at a goat farm for like 2 years or something, and then he left. And it was like the nicest goat farm ever. Like they were wild, but he couldn't stand that, like the human husbandry of it all, like having to breed the goats and having to separate the babies to get the milk. He couldn't stand that, so he left.
No.
Like even though they were like in the best conditions ever, and like the whole free will thing and the whole like he worked really hard. It's almost like he likes to get hurt,
Oh yeah.
like he works so hard, like he'll get blisters and he'll be like it's okay, keep working.
Yeah, well, that's that might be a man thing. We work and we bust our knuckles, and we were very happy about it actually.
Yeah, maybe, but his is pretty extreme. Like he'll walk barefoot, like in the desert, get spikes and like
That's
not
awesome.
care.
Yeah, very hard. Very he's Shiva himself, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So we get that kind of thing. It's kind of funny to see Cher and Madonna sort of have very similar placements. Astra is actually kind of a Cher Madonna kind of a figure as well. Who else we got here? Albert Speer. He was I believe he was an architect, but he ended up dealing with all the armament and production in Nazi Germany of the weapons and that. And he like increased production like 10 times, did a really good, strong job. I don't know if you guys know who Alex Gray is. You should. If you look him up and have a look at his art, Alex Gray paintings or something you can look up. Really just mind-blowing stuff. Kind of paintings of the energy system in a sense. So really kind of new age stuff. Once you see it, you'll be like, yeah, I know that. And so he traveled around on the bus quite a bit and sort of displays his art. But he was this old guy. He goes to these like something like Burning Man, and he's got this kind of a chill out place, the kind of a clinic sort of thing as well. So he's kind of taking care of all these sort of young kids at the parties and all of that sort of stuff. He must be, I'm not sure if he's even still alive. He must be like 70 years old or something. interesting here. She's like George Floyd, Lee Harvey Oswald, both of their names right together. Sorry, I put Ian's name right beside them. Tenzin was kind of a character. He was he was a little bit mentally handicapped, but he had a lot of responsibilities and a lot of power and a lot of money. But he didn't have the mind for it at all. And looking at his chart, I'm pretty sure he was actually talking about the love of animals. Pretty sure he was involved in some bestiality kind of stuff. Kind of a really one of the stranger people I've met in my travels. That was way up in the hills in Nepal, actually. Or not Nepal. It was way up in the hills of India, but very close to Tibet and China, sort of thing. Really isolated sort of character. We get. I don't think Michael Jordan's name is right, but I've got him there for now. Someone like Steven Spielberg, he's got the AAA rating on his birth chart. Let me just let's have a quick look at Steven Spielberg here. Yes. There you go. And so here we get someone like Steven Spielberg's chart. Ardra rising, Ardra ascendant. You get his Mercury is interesting because it's going down into the sixth house, and so he must be fairly technical, but always dealing with fixing things. The ruler of Ardra, Rahu, he's got up in the 12th house, and so that's really expanding the imagination. And well, he's not famous for animals, but he's probably mostly famous for ET. Really got him on the map. And so, kind of creature, these mythical creatures like Sage Puraha, who's the guru, the sage of Ardra. And so we can see it like that a little bit. For him, really, his power comes through his fifth house there with Moon, Jupiter, Venus all together. Venus in its own house. Jupiter is, well, 10th Lord is the important one going in. His job is going into creative field sort of thing. And then Venus is there. And so very, very creative, able to find nice balance and get good harmony. And the moon in fifth house is really strong for creativity. But then the moon is also his second lord. And so probably has some investments and that sort of thing as well. So that kind of thing. See what else we can see here.
Steven Spielberg also did like Jurassic Park,
Okay.
Jaws.
Oh wow, yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was a pretty animal. War Horse.
Oh, okay, yeah. So he's big time into the animals, and that's cool. Thanks for
Yeah.
thanks for being a bit of a movie buff at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's Steven Spielberg's connection with animals quite strong. I don't know, I think she just left, but she also knew Estelle, another forest girl, kind of a Rudra figure living out in the forest. Not sure about her connection with animals either, but with that sort of thing. Claude Monet, he was an interesting painter. He had crazy problems with his eyes and his vision and seeing color, but he would also I think it was pretty sure it was Monet. He would set up like 10 canvases, like 10 or 12 sort of easels and canvases. And as the light was changing, it was do a dab on this, but then the light would change. And so he'd go to the next one to get that light. And he was trying to get, there's one cathedral in France in particular, he was trying to paint it in every which light. And so there's all these different versions of it. And you think, oh, he's gone mad. But actually, that's what he was seeing at different times of the day. It's like he just blew people's minds. So that's that. There's a picture of a very Ardra sort of picture that's smoky, hazy, sort of volcanic, unpredictable nature of Ardra, the jungle and the haze, the mist and the jungle sort of thing. Very, very Ardra. There's the volcanoes.
That's fine.
Go ahead.
Mike. So right now I'm in my Jupiter dasha, and my Jupiter is in Ardra. So does that mean that like my life right now is gonna have more of an Ardra kind of feel to it, like that?
That's going to be the setting of your life in a sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where Jupiter is, will be Ardra and Gemini. So it'll be a lot of teams, a lot of groups, a lot of short travels, a lot of wildness and wilderness. So make sure you got a good tent and sleeping bag. So, yeah, definitely. Um, you'll probably end up in Tofino eventually, and that's you get that jungle mist kind of going through. It's a very ardent place, very wild place. So I'll let you kind of read that stuff. I mentioned some of the learning difficulties that Ardras can have. So up above was dyslexia and ADHD is also sort of possible with Ardra placements. Yeah, here's the picture, kind of like the Jata, like the dreadlocks almost of Shiva. Really wild kind of look. Korean War was an Ardra, Sun in Ardra now is where we're at. Jean-Paul Sartre, he was an interesting character because we mostly know him as a philosopher. He's the one that said we're condemned to be free. Kind of these existential philosophers. But he wrote some really great books, like novels, like very readable. Kind of nice thing about some of these existentialists like Sartre and Camus we saw, I think, last time. They're these philosophers, but they're writing kind of novels is how they're expressing their philosophy. And so it was very easy, very connectable. George Orwell, 1984, Chris Christopherson. He was a great songwriter, but a traveler, a balladeer. One of his, I don't know how much he connects to Ardra, but I think one of his most famous albums was called The Prophet. So many great songs on that album. Really good stuff. George Michael, he's a little dated now, but he was almost a Madonna figure in the 80s in a sense. Johnny Gottsling, he's kind of a relative, I suppose. He's got his name on the Stanley Cup, and he coached hockey, the Chicago Blackhawks, I think is who he's with. And then he coached a lot of women's hockey as well. But I sort of get the sense as a coach. Again, it's a lot of on the road, a lot of traveling comes in the Ardra. And so he was also traveling a lot, but a lot of like yelling and screaming and howling in a sense, you could say. Meryl Streep, I've got some writing a little bit on her down below somewhere. But again, I'm not sure where she connects with the animals. Callum is also very musical. And say, oh, Elon Musk has his son in Ardra. Just pull his chart up here quick. And so yeah, here we go. Yeah, Sun and Ardra there, and I don't know if you can see that, but Mercury and Ascendant are Punarvasu, so they're a little bit different. But so he's got that third lord in his first house, and so I'm sure a lot of these, like the rockets, are probably more connected with the Punarvasu because that's very connected with the rockets, but the Ardra is very much connected with the roar of the rockets and the sound probably of these factories that he's got going. Big Tesla factory just outside of Austin, Texas, where I am now, actually. He's well, the sun and the ascendant like that make him very, very confident. But he's also Elon Musk. He's also a bit of he expresses himself like an outcast. He is kind of that diamond in the rough sort of figure, very much so. He's like, well, he's this Einstein figure, but he's like smoking dope with Joe Rogan. He's like, I'll say what I want. I don't care if my stock prices go down. And so he's kind of there to make noise. Kind of interesting that he's with Twitter now, and making a bunch of noise that way. And so that probably relates because of the ascendant being Gemini, but then the sun is also the third lord going in the first house. And so actually you can see his ascendant really connects him quite a bit with media and that sort of thing. And moon in third really makes him comfortable in that sphere. You should be able to make some money that way. But Rahu, oh, jeepers, look at that. If his chart is correct, then he's in a Rahu Ketu period now. And so shit's probably about to hit the fan for poor Elon. And he'll be on a little bit of a different direction probably after this. Well, it's almost at the end of that here now. So Rahu, Venus. Yeah, I don't know. He might sort of start diving into his imagination. And one of the things people really like about Elon is that he'll try to do what's impossible. Remember, I was doing a bit of research on him before he started SpaceX and making these rockets. He's trying to figure out a cheap way to get things into space. And he tried to buy some ICBMs he actually went to Russia and talked with the army there and tried to buy some ICBM missiles. So he's like his imagination just goes, but it's with Saturn up there in the 12th house. And so he really wants to make these things a reality. And so I think where is it? Possible Rahu Ketu, Rahu Venus. Rahu really wants to involve him in a scandal. If this chart is correct for him, Rahu and Mars. It's interesting actually to see, where is it? The same?
And in Shravana too. So that would be like something maybe related to nature.
Yeah, Shravan's also, well, he's trying to do the whole electric car thing to protect nature in a sense. But even I don't know, the electric car thing's kind of funny, you know, we do it to protect nature, but it's really to protect our own conscience because the car seems to, as far as we see, it's much more favorable to nature. But if you actually look into the mining process and all the rest for these batteries, like, God, it might even be a worse disaster than any of it in a way. I don't know. It's hard to say which is the best. You know what? Sometimes I think, well, dams are the best, but that really disturbs the fish habitats and things like that. And of course, the fish is what feeds a lot of the birds. And so there's sort of these, I don't know, these chains of nature issues that'll come up with it, just about any of it. But I just wanted to see, I closed Einstein's chart. Just want to open that again quick. Yeah, isn't that interesting? Elon Musk and Einstein both have Rahu and Mars in the 8th house like that. Mars Danista, Rahu Shravan. And Rahu Shravan, and Mars is a bit different nakshatra, but that's kind of interesting to see the two of them with similar placements like that. Researchers, right? Just that 8th house, just doing research and just very driven. And Rahu's just so fascinated with all the mysteries, just wants to dive in and know all that stuff you're not supposed to know, right? Like, well, in Einstein's case, how to end the world. And well, in a sense, Elon Musk also is making rockets, and I'm sure his technology is going into missiles and things like that. I wouldn't be surprised if he's also doing some research on the Americans are trying to build those supersonic missiles, whatever. And so Elon might even be working with that sort of thing as well. Hard to say, but possible with that. So we also get here Elon Musk, Herman Oberth. He was the founding father of rocketry and aeronautics. So it's interesting, the sun in Ardra, it's really like, it's like this volcano, right? It's like this so much heat, sort of heat and pressure and all of that kind of thing. What else can we say here? Treaty of Lancaster was kind of interesting because that was some kind of treaty, but it was a false treaty. I think they kind of a false peace in a sense. And I think what happened there, I think that was the Treaty of Lancaster. And it was a false peace, and everybody sort of gathered and they just killed them all, kind of thing. Night of the Long Knives. That's where Hitler got his start. He went into the Reichstag and kind of just stabbed everyone, killed everyone. Mike Tyson with placements here. Also brutal, sort of brutal fighter. Remember him biting off Vander Holyfield's ear. People tell me now that they're like, Mike Tyson's actually, he's not this brutal guy we all think he is. I don't believe him, but that's what they tell me. He's kind of grown into being like almost kind of a guru figure and really doing a lot to help out boxers that are coming up and that sort of thing. So he's maybe got his life straightened out a little bit from what it used to be. I think Emma Goldman, maybe also Princess Diana are similar figures. Pamela Anderson, Helen Keller. Oh God, they're all very similar. Liv Tyler. These all very strong, independent women. Like these are women nobody's going to tell anything to. I don't know if you've heard of Emma Goldman. She was one of these early anarchists in the USA. And so she was pretty cool. I wrote a paper on her years ago. Helen Keller, blind and deaf, kind of a raging bitch as far as anybody could tell. But I think Emma Gold and Pamela Anderson were kind of the same. Liv Tyler also, like that. Joel C., he's a good friend of mine. And because of his Ardra, because of his love for Shiva in a sense, he does media production. What else is he doing? Works with a lot of the media stuff he does, actually working with like the Green Party in politics and a lot of sort of non-profit stuff. He did a our most recent documentary was something on the homeless people and that kind of thing. Sunil Yu, he owns the restaurant I go to in Varanasi all the time. Really good guy, really strong Shiva character as well. Strong Shiva devotion. A little bit, you could say he would seem like a secular guy to most people, but he's very strongly Shiva devoted, very strong into sports. Joel too, almost well, actually, if I think about it, a little bit similar to Elon Musk. Like they're a little bit hyperactive. They've always got something going and they've always got to keep moving and so many different things going on. Like both of those guys, just incredible. Canada, there's Canada's sun and is an Ardra. And so we can see that's Canada expresses itself as this sort of nature place in a sense, right? The wilderness of like that. Julian Assange. Someone else was pointing this out to me. A lot of people with Ardra placements kind of working on the computers and the network, like hackers and that sort of thing, have this. The Haralabos Vulgaris. He's one of these famous gamblers. I'm not sure if I had his correct birth time or not. Maybe I did. That's why I made his chart. I had a client for a little while. He was doing a lot of research. He was a gambler. He was doing his research mostly he gambled on MMA fights. He used to bet on those. And so he wanted to know astrology so he could be a better gambler. And so anyway, we did a little gambler's charts a little bit. Herman Hesse, there's another name up here. Herman Hesse almost reminds me a little bit of Chris Christopherson. I don't know if you've read any Herman Hesse books, but they're quite short and very, very readable. Beautiful, incredible books he's written. He was one of these early kind of Europeans. He also went to India and sort of traveled around there quite a few years ago. Again, I think it's been years since I read his book, but there was a sense of this love of nature. I think there was one, I think it was Siddhartha. Siddhartha is kind of Buddha's, let's say, maiden name or whatever. His birth name was, so they called him Siddhartha. And so Herman Hesse has a great book about Siddhartha. And really what it is he goes down and he's listening. He has to learn to listen to the river is kind of the final lesson. But at some point he goes into the city and he lives in a gambling den and some prostitute comes in and is one of the main gurus for him. And eventually he goes back out and works with this ferry keeper and learns to listen to the river. Beautiful books. Like that. Catherine Thailand. She's and she was like 18 years old. She went to go work on cruise ships. And now she's kind of a servant on like yachts for billionaires. They'll have like her and a cook. Usually, she says there's usually just two of them working on there, and then well, the captain and crew and the family, the people whose boat it is, and their family. And so she's always way out there. Again, it's not wilderness, but she's not in civilization very much. So she's kind of a wild girl as well, very unique. Lots of energy. We're going to jump ahead here. You go. See, Turkey had the ascendant was Ardra, and now the moon is also in Ardra. And so mostly when they write about Ardra, they're talking about the moon in Ardra, of course. Bimrao Ambedkar, he was like that Ambedkar. I think he helped write the Indian Constitution, but he was kind of a leader for the outcasts in India. And I talked about surgeons also being outcasts because of the fact they're doing surgery. So Christian Barnard, he was a very early heart surgeon. There might have even, was it him or the other guy? There was a movie they put out about one of these heart surgeons because they had he's like this big time heart surgeon, but he had this really wild life, really wild lifestyle. George Orwell, it's kind of interesting, a second placement also for him in there. Does Jacob, he's an American guy from California, but he got fascinated with like Indian devotional songs, kind of not the regular ones, the folk songs to Shiva and that kind of thing. Really incredible musician. Frank Costello, also a good musician, I think musician. He's an old guy, I can't remember. Boy George, we mentioned him, also music. Virgin Mary, I don't know if I've got her correct birth time or not, but there she is. She had kind of a wild child for a boy. That Jesus was probably a handful, kind of a rebel, right? So then you get Olivia Newton-John. She's a similar character to the Madonna and Cher's, I guess you could say. Dominic Monaghan. I'm gonna pull his chart up because I don't think I had his birth time, but when I rectified his chart, it was very, very interesting because it was exactly my chart. He was what you call Mary in that super famous movie with the books. We'll find it here. There's the Lord of the Rings. And so he was in Lord of the Rings. And what I found funny is I think it was his Jupiter moon period is when he sort of did a lot of that filming for Lord of the Rings right around there, 2002, 2003. And so he was doing Lord of the Rings in his Jupiter moon. He has the exact same chart I do. There's some subtle or some differences. His moon is in Ardra, mine is in Migration. But otherwise, all the placements are the same. So when he was doing Lord of the Rings was the first time I went to Varanasi, which I found kind of funny because it was like he was doing Lord like kind of medieval sort of settings, and I was also in my own medieval setting. Again, part of me doesn't want to believe that this is his chart, but it seems to work quite well for him. One of the big differences, and again, it's just like my chart. You can see he's born December 8th. I'm born on December 7th, but he was in Germany. I was in Canada. So there was actually, anyways, quite close. Just that moon movement a little bit. And so he's also done a lot of travel and a lot of kind of adventure travel. If you look up a picture of him, I got a picture actually, it'll come down below. There's, me and him have some quite similarities as well. And look, oh. So Fran is kind of, she's got Sun in Ardra. So Fran Prashant, she's kind of interesting. She's got her PhD in aesthetics, studying Abhinavagupta, sort of tantric aesthetics. And she's a theater person, and she sings and she dances, and she might be She might be one of the most beautiful women I've ever met, actually. Fran, she's, well, so beautiful and feminine, you could say as well. Not that sort of masculine, sexy beauty, just so pretty dresses and all of that kind of thing. Just a lovely, lovely girl. Kapil Baba and Fraser, they seem to be a little bit similar. One's Canada and one's India, but Kapil Baba has an ashram on Narmada, but he's also a tantric Baba, kind of a dark Guruji. But he's also working with a woman from the UK, and so he's been bringing. They brought a static dance to this little village in India that's never, like, they hardly see any foreigners. Never mind 40 foreign women going in there, hardly wearing anything. Caused a huge stir, and he's kind of a. We talk about the outcast. He's kind of an outcast in his village. Before that, he already was, but like that. And Fraser also, I think Fraser R. He's kind of an outcast. Deals drugs and does a lot of sort of festival stuff and bouncer kind of things. We get like someone like Shiv Code. We saw Julian Assange, and Shiv Code's also Coder. That's his name. And I think, like, when we think of the, like, something like the prana vayus, this flowing of energy, and I think that sort of relates somewhat with some of this computer work and some of this coding work, because who wrote that book? Run Rabbit Run, it was called. It was written, I think, in the early 80s. And back in the early 80s, everybody was sure that we would find God through the computer, that you could find God through the ones and zeros kind of thing. And so I think that sort of relates, like Shiv Code's kind of on that sort of path. I think Julian Assange, again, not exactly looking for God, but looking for all those mysteries, looking for all those things we don't really know so well. There you go. Canada also has Sun and Ardra. Or sorry, no, we're at Moon now. Sorry, Moon and Ardra. Okay, yeah. Like that. Someone like Kenny Rogers, also the gambler. I think gambling also sort of ties in with Ardra, that risk-taking sort of idea. Kenny Rogers was also a little bit. So Shiva was the one, he shot Brahma in the thigh when he was chasing after his daughter. Kenny Rogers caused a scene at some point. Some other country music singer apparently raped or sexually assaulted. I don't know exactly what it was, but he raped some girl. Maybe she was also a famous singer. And everybody sort of kept it hush hush. And then Kenny Rogers sort of came in, and I think it was like at a music awards show, he got up on stage and like just called this guy out. And so there was a huge sort of war between Kenny Rogers and this other fellow. But that kind of brings us also towards like Rudra protecting the daughter sort of thing. Anastasia, these three girls are also very, very similar. Almas, Anastasia, and Heather, all very different. Russian, what are we? Russian, Iranian, and Canadian, I guess. But they're all kind of into hot yoga. They're all super flexible, super into their body, very connected to the body, to the breath, all of that kind of thing. Also sort of outcasts in their group. Heather has a little boy with some, I don't know exactly what, some mental problems. So she's quite stressed out from that, brings a lot of work, a lot of stress to her. And so there's in Tofino, there's a group, there's a Coastal Bliss group and all these sort of yoga girls. And Heather's a little bit on the outside of that. Anastasia also, she's a longtime friend in Varanasi, but she's also sort of stays out of everything off on the side. Kind of interesting. A lot of this sort of outcast sort of thing. But then you get a lot of intelligence. We saw Elon Musk, Albert Einstein. Here we get Isaac Newton with his moon here. Someone like John Stuart Mill. I don't know if you've read any John Stuart Mill. It'd be good to actually have any interest in kind of politics. A lot of the fights that are going now, I think everybody thinks John Stuart Mill sort of settled a lot of those arguments, but he was the one to sort of champion laissez-faire, the invisible hand kind of things he talked about in the society. And again, that's that freedom of the marketplace. And it got sort of interpreted as this sort of like law of the jungle in the marketplace. But actually his first book was like a genealogy of morals or something. And so he was very much about like free market, but it had to be, if it was going to work, it had to be kind of morally correct marketing and business, you could say. You could say the businessmen had to be sort of moral people. And so that was kind of interesting. Tom Waits, one of my favorite singers there. Singing like Chris Christopherson, a lot of travel, a lot of good tunes. I think of one of his songs I was listening to recently, The Pony, brings it back to animals again. I hope my pony can find its way back home, right? That kind of thing. Get someone like Gian Gomeshi. He was a radio host in Canada, also had accusations of sexual abuse or sexual assault. And they did find him criminally culpable. And even by his chart, I'm not sure how criminal he is, but he is kind of a dirtbag. But being a dirtbag's not illegal at the end of the day. Joseph Conrad, another great author. Well, I love a lot of these authors that have hard little placements. The Heart of Darkness was Joseph Conrad's big book. This kind of going into Africa, following some river into Africa, I believe was what it was about. But there's that sort of sense of traveling generally, especially when you're really pioneering traveling, going to new places, going to places where nobody is. You're going into not only the heart of darkness of, say, a new land, but you go into your own heart of darkness traveling a lot of times. Because you get out there and it's like, well, we mentioned morals earlier, and everyone's very morally upright when everybody is watching. But then it's kind of like, how do you act when nobody's watching? You know, you're in the jungle, you're with some tribe, or you can kind of do anything you want out there. And so that's kind of what travel is. We go into our own heart of darkness. Some great mathematicians here. Fencing, sword fighting guy from Italy. Papu Yadav, actually, he's very similar to this fellow up here. Where was he? Kapil Baba. He's also another, Papu's a Varanasi Baba, but they're kind of these, I don't know, I say like middle-class, hardworking Babas sort of guys, right? They're not really ever going to get famous, I don't think, but they'll just kind of do their job, and they do their really good Babas if you ever meet them and get to do some work with them. There we are. John Candy had some placements here. Leonard Nimoy. Was this Ardra? Okay, maybe not. Leonard Nimoy was Dr. Spock on the old Star Trek sort of thing. Quebec has its moon in Ardra, the province of Quebec, like that. Quebec's it's wild rivers, and I think of like, it's funny when I travel, this Quebecois beers, this Maudit, La Fin du Monde, very, very famous sort of Quebecois beers. But you see those things all over the world. It's really incredible. It's like the only sign of Canada I see. But it's these, they're all sort of connected to Ardra, the Maudit, the damned, the accursed. Yeah. So interesting to see Quebec also there. We'll get there. I was going to skip ahead to your Jupiter, but we'll get there. It's on the list. So you got Mars and Ardra. And this is, well, you have to think this is going to be really intense because Ardra is already really intense and Mars by itself is really intense. And so you put these two together and it's going to be pretty brutal. You get, Wayne Gretzky has this. It's, and I don't know exactly how that would relate with Wayne Gretzky, but I think because Ardra is already quite good at sports, they're quite flexible. You could say, I think Ardras will tend to be, a lot of times they might be double jointed somehow as well. Almost some, well, I saw it a couple other people above, I didn't mention it, but almost circus ability, right? Like I can do a circus act, they have some strange thing that they can do. And here, so we see India has Mars and Ardra. There's got to be something also like very warrior about this Mars and Ardra as well, because Gemini already is kind of the arms, not just the arms on our body, but weapons, the extensions of us, and that kind of thing. And maybe also with Wayne Gretzky, it's because he had such a great shot. And I think there is some shooters here. You get Sex Pistols, Derek Chauvin, that's that cop that I don't know what to say he did, but anyways, the black guy died and Black Lives Matter started. All that rioting and stuff. So that was Derek Chauvin. Again, I didn't have his exact birth time, but Mars will probably be in Ardra. Tara Reid. Not sure who she is exactly, one of the Me Too women, but I think she might be one of them they didn't actually take seriously. So the outcast among the Me Too women sort of thing. I think she's the one that accused Biden. I think that was Tara Reid. And so all the Me Too was going and everybody was like, support women, support women. And here was Tara Reid going like, hello, what about me? Mary Ann Polly Seguin. I think that's the woman her husband might have killed her. I'm just gonna pull her chart up for a second because I'm kind of curious about that. Oh yeah, there it is. So Martin moves in luck house. So maybe not very good luck. Yeah, so she was killed by her husband. And this does give an AA rating on it from her birth record, her birth time. So this should be a correct chart. And so I guess her husband was that Ardra character, that sort of wild Ardra character that ended up killing her. And I think Purnam Vasu, in a sense, like Purnam Vasu is kind of like a bullet in a sense, and Ardra is almost like the bow. And so I think really when you get a couple of planets there like that, it can be quite dangerous. And there is a sense, and I saw it much more in Purnam Vasu, but there seems to be a little bit of this in Mars and Ardra, where there's just a good shot in a sense. I think her husband actually killed her by an axe to the head or something really brutal like that. David, he's one of my cousins. He's great with a gun, really good shot, really intense, really actually he's a lot like Uri from Goa. Uri is actually what would you call him? An enlightened Russian gangster. Anyways, lots of money, way too much money, tons of money. He's got like 6 guys following around going, hey boss, what do you want me to do? Hey man, boss, can I do anything for you? And so kind of interesting that way. And my cousin's a little bit like that. He's kind of this big boss man and really commands like a lot of respect, a little bit crazy too. And so people are a little bit on edge when they're with him. And I think Yuri's probably the same. I met him on his good face, but I think he has darker faces that I didn't see. Here we see like Sid Vicious killed his girlfriend. Osama bin Laden has placements here. John McAfee wrote a note that if I die, it's not suicide, and then he committed suicide. Nobody's really sure what happened there. Brett Hall was famous for a shot. He was like, had one of the best shots in hockey back in those days. So you can see quite a bit going on there. Titanic sunk. And so you get the sense, even from a lot of these names and a lot of these people that have them, it's kind of a Mars and Ardra is a little bit rough. It's pretty hard energy to kind of handle, I think. Shivaji, he was a famous kind of freedom fighter in India. I think he was killed, assassinated in his 20s. John Calvin, another kind of outcast Calvinism. I think it was John Calvin that kind of started the Protestant movement and nailed the notice to the door of the church kind of a thing. And so definitely an outcast. TKV Kacharya, he took over, what did he take over? Some form of yoga, Krishnamacharya's yoga. Anyways, he took over one of these big yoga schools. He called it Vinny Yoga, and then he dropped Vinny and just called it Yoga Yoga. can see Shakespeare is here as well. Very interesting character, Shakespeare. Just by his writing, and a lot of controversy about that. They're not really sure if Shakespeare was the writer of a lot of his plays, or he had some help, or what was going on. Let's just pull his chart up because there's something quite interesting in Shakespeare's chart. And if I'm going through here, if there's any of these people's charts you want to see, just say, hey, can we look at Shakespeare's chart? Or hey, let's have a look at that one. So you get someone like Shakespeare here. Oh, well, he's got Mars and Ketu in Ardra. If this chart is correct, he would have had some kind of surgery done to his face. Certainly would have had a brutal scar on his face somehow. And maybe that led to wearing more masks or something like that, more of the theater thing going on. It's hard to say. But that's also right in his second house. And so that's his voice, his yell. And so he must have had quite a powerful voice as well. But then again, Ketu's there. And so I don't know, did he lose his voice? Did he have some problems with his speech or his teeth? And again, then it's like, well, is this even his chart? I kind of remember looking at it and I got a real strong sense that it was his chart, actually. You get the strong Venus moon in the ascendant, so that he knows theater. He knows those sort of theories of aesthetics very well. You get this Saturn, Yogataka Saturn going into his third house for writing and things like that. You see a lot of writers, especially, not sure with Pushya, but I think any of the Saturn in Cancer, I saw it a lot with, what's in Cancer? Ashlesha, Pushya. Maybe it was Ashlesha. Anyways, I see a lot of writers with Saturn in Cancer in the third house. Very sort of common thing. And then you get Jupiter there, and so it just expands all of that writing. You got Mercury in the 11th house, so making money from that. But a little bit also, Mercury's also considered debilitated. And so the idea is just sort of rushing through them quite fast. And then Sun is exalted up in the 12th house. And so I don't know if he's working nights in the theater or that sort of thing. Like that. So again, you get, like I mentioned, Shivaji was a sort of freedom fighter in India, died early. Malcolm X is also here. John McAfee was similar. Osama bin Laden, a lot of people consider him freedom fighter. Who else is there? Yeah, Wim Hof is kind of intense, right? He's the Iceman. And so maybe it's because he has so much heat from from Mars and Ardra that he dunks himself in ice. Ingrid Bergman, she was also very, very interesting sort of life as she traveled and things like that. I think it was Ingrid Bergman. No, that was somebody else. Yeah, it was somebody else traveling with a coffin for a while. The only reason she did so because it attracted a lot of attention. But I don't think that was Ingrid Bergman, somebody else. Paula Yeats, I think she got sued for some kind of fascia buster or something like this. Anyway, she started some kind of business, one of these I don't know, $29.99. It was $69.99. Now it's just, now $49.99. No, now we're selling it for $29.99. So one of those things like that, she kind of invented and made quite a bit of money. So like this, oh wow, Kim D, Aditya Sharma, Shauna Wu, all very, very similar characters in a lot of ways. Being strong, independent women. None of them you really want to cross. Wu is interesting because she's like fully schizophrenic, but she's also quite lucid. You can talk with her. And I get a sense that it's not normal schizophrenia. She's some kind of like strange seer or channeler, or I never figured Wu out exactly, but very, very interesting woman in any case. Sean Lethbridge, he was I don't know if he had the surgery, if he was transgender or just a cross dresser. I'm not sure. But he had a big house, and so he actually took care of a lot of other transgenders and a lot of other people that were sort of sexually confused like that. Rishabh, he was he came from a very wealthy family in India, and then he became a heroin junkie for a bunch of years. Ended up going to jail. I think it was actually for fraud for a bunch of years. And then I met him. He's got a little cafe there and really straightened his life out. But he's a very strong sort of Shiva character and one of these guys you wouldn't want to mess with at all. On the fourth pada, we seem to get a little bit more philosophy going on here. Jiddu Krishnamurti, he's kind of a secular philosophy in India. A lot of Western people like his writing. Arthur Schopenhauer also kind of wrote about freedom. He's one of the few philosophers someone like Nietzsche liked, for example. Or no, it was the other way around. Schopenhauer was maybe a student of Nietzsche. Mikhail Bakunin, another anarchist. So we saw another anarchist. A few of these people actually I would call kind of anarchists. They don't want any law, or libertarians or anarchists, something like that. A lot of these people seem to sort of fall into that category. Robin Williams died from depression. What else we got? Yeah, Harpreet Singh. He's like a psychoanalyst in India. He's not working right now. He's just had a massive Ardra moment, I guess you could say. Got married and it all fell apart within a few months. And he actually comes from a nice Sikh family in India, and so they take marriage quite seriously. And so he's kind of an outcast. Boy, married a Western woman, and that fell apart very quickly. And so he's kind of outcast from his family now. I'm still kind of talking to him, kind of counseling him through that, I guess, or talking him through it. Seem to have some names on here twice. That's okay. It almost doesn't seem to matter what planet is in Ardra. These people are very, at least for a part of their life, very freedom loving, very like nobody's going to tell them what to do. Melissa Etheridge, she was a country music singer, but I think she was one of these first. I'm not sure if Melissa Etheridge is a lesbian or not. She looks like one. And I think she was maybe one of these early lesbians kind of in music. Like that. See Emma Goldwyn and Princess Diana again, more Ardra placements. Conor McGregor. I think there'll be a lot of sort of fighters and athletes that we'll find with Ardra placements. Johnny Gottslick, we saw his chart up ahead, up above a little bit. It's actually the same name as my father. So in my research, we'll see Johnny Gottslick and you'll see John Gottslick. It's actually two different people. The John is my father and Johnny is some distant relative. Alexander R. He actually works a lot of music concerts, setting up the stages and that kind of thing. Does a lot of that heights work, right? Climbing up the big towers and doing the work that needs to be done up there. Kunti Devi's interesting woman. She's Belarusian and moved to Canada. She was a lesbian, actually. She's married now with a child. Married an Indian guy in Canada, and so, but she was living out of the. I don't know if you know about like Shivananda Ashram, but they have these little centers in the city, and she was like living in a room in the back of a Shivananda center, kind of thing. We can see some wildness like Donald Sutherland, Peter the Great of Russia, Natalie Portman. Tim Took was in the Olympics. Not his real name, but it's okay. Sean Lethbridge, interesting to see that. A lot of these outcast placements as well, like Sean Lethbridge. Again, I'm not sure if he's cross-dresser or cross-dresser or a transgender, but certainly an outcast figure. Definitely. Tribhavan Shukleshwar. He's a cop, but he was Oh, such a sweet man. He's a big officer, actually. But he came and he made one of his superiors angry. And so he's suffering for it. And he was like, when am I gonna get a promotion? It was kind of like, oh, sorry, man, I don't see one for like 10 years. He's like, oh, I made that guy mad. Nothing's gonna happen. So he's a cop, but I think he's kind of an outcast amongst the cops, in a sense. Just like Donald Trump. Uh, there is Jean Charest. He was the separatist leader of Quebecois Separatist Party for a period. Or Jean Charest, maybe it was the Liberal Party of Quebec, but he had some separatist leanings, I think. Gustav Klimt, Rembrandt, Paul Gauguin. Oh, you just see these incredible artists, three bang, bang, bang like that with Mercury and Ardra. And I think they can get probably quite wild when they're painting. Rembrandt maybe a little bit less. He was up in the ceilings, but certainly Gauguin and Klimt were very abstract or impressionist. Cat Stevens, getting this sort of sense of like Donald Trump used to be a liberal, for example, and then he became a Republican to run for president. Cat Stevens, he grew up Christian and converted to Islam. Stephen Crowder, he also has a YouTube channel. I don't know if he still does or not. He's kind of I don't know, a Texan Canadian sort of a fellow. I think he grew up in Canada, but now he's living down in the States somewhere and loves carrying the gun and kind of chats about all that. But I think he's also got some major health problems going on. Something I think with some of the Rahu placements as well, you'll get health problems because there's something unusual in the body somehow. Like that. Adesh Jacob, this is I think the third time we've seen him with Ardra placement. He's quite a wild Shiva character, so you can see that. John the Cross, in a way, also a wild Shiva character. Count Zeppelin. He was the guy who made let's call it a Zeppelin, that big floating thing that blew up one time and nobody wanted to make it again. That kind of thing comes in. Someone like Woody Harrelson. Yes, it's interesting. A lot of communications here. Giangameshi was radio. Dace is a translator. Trying to think, like someone like Woody Harrelson's a very nice guy, but again, I think he's outcast a little bit from the movie making studios. I don't even know if he's still making movies, but he just kind of got out of all that. I think he bought an island and just hangs out his island a lot. That kind of thing. Just look at one of these charts. Cat Stevens house. Oh. Here we get Cat Stevens. Looking to see well, he's certainly known for his religion, Ninth Lord coming up into here, maybe because with Mercury, he made a change in his religion. But a lot of times that shows up when you change your religion. A lot of times it shows up by Ninth Lord in the sixth house. It's like you take on the enemy's beliefs, in a sense. Yeah, we can see it from Moon, actually. There we go. Yeah, so Cat Stevens charts. So this Mercury in Ardra has a lot to do with like Cat Stevens conversion into Muslim faith, into Islam. And you can see clearly that Ninth Lord going into the sixth house. But he think maybe because the Venus is there, well, certainly a lot of controversy. So Mars was probably very controversial in the ninth house that way, controversial beliefs. But the Venus kind of soothed a lot of that sort of stuff out. And I think as far as his arm goes, it's probably more connected to Sufism than it is to what we know as modern Islam. So here we get Jupiter and Ardra. Nice Ram Dass quote, compassion refers to the arising of the heart of desire to relieve suffering for all beings. And so I would expect Jupiter and Ardra will probably be quite nice, but on another sense, if I think of the stories of Shiva shooting the bow and all of that, Jupiter is often considered Brahma. And so it could be the Brahma characters getting involved with that myth. Someone like, see, a lot of powerful people have this: Nelson Mandela, Hoover, Marcon, King Henry VIII. He was the guy that was famous for beheading his wives and kind of causing a kind of causing a schism in the church so he could get a divorce, that kind of thing. Mary Lemieux, Patrick Waugh, a couple old school hockey players. With this, Mary Lemieux again was very well known for a good shot. And I think it's that wildness of hockey, like the fastest game on earth, I think they call it sometimes. I don't actually know a lot of these people, so I'm kind of scoping through. I do know Rahul. He's a great, really great yogi, really great guy. Kind of secular yogi, but still very beautiful heart, very philosophical. He does a younger yoga, basically trained as high as you can in that. Eliana T, she's also a very strong Shaivite, a little bit of knowledge of astrology and tantric philosophy and that kind of thing. Very community orientated. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that with the Jupiter. Is that more community oriented, gives an expansion, gives a lot of hope in that area. People coming around the corner seeing what I'm up to. Seeing if I'm good, I go. So you get someone like William the Conqueror, Catherine the Great. She was kind of an enlightened ruler in a sense, helped bring a lot of kind of Russia and Prussia, I guess, up into modern times. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I'm honored. I'm honored. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, you get your point in here, but you're amongst your name. I'm looking at these names that are around it. It's like Almas and Aditya. We've seen them before. Almas is a very, very strong yogi, kind of hot yoga sort of stuff. Uh, she's an Iranian woman, married a Iranian man, but their marriage is kind of, I think she's kind of an outcast. Like she's not, and I don't know if it's him or her or both, but they're not really close in their marriage. They're just married and they have a house, they share a house. Otherwise, a lot of their life kind of goes on their own. Very, very independent. Aditi's also super independent. Samantha Adi was like, she was wondering if she was going to sell her business for like $120 million or something like that. Because she did this startup and she's had it going for 10 years and now it's this massive thing. She wants to get rid of it. And it's worth like just huge money. And so I'm not sure if she's done that just yet. I would have to look at her chart again, but we'll leave her. Dawn is also a very good yogi. She's actually, she does when Justin Trudeau goes surfing in Tofino, she does his massage, actually. So that's Dawn. Shakyaman, kind of interesting. Shakyaman's also a Muslim woman from the UK. But for quite a few years, me and her were quite close friends, just kind of talking and chatting together and things like that. She works with the Muslim community. She's fully dedicated to that, but she's also like, she's unique. She's very independent on the other hand. Doesn't take any shit from her husband. She's had a divorce before. Her children are everything kind of thing. Very kind of unique woman. And then HAM, I can't remember him off him. Papu Yadav. He's at a few places, that Varanasi Babaji. again, teaching yoga and Yadav is actually, it's a, well, Krishna was a Yadav. He came from he was a keeper of the cows. And so it's kind of a low caste. I don't know if it's an outcast name or just a farmer name, more of a farmer name, I suppose, servant name. And so Papu Yadav is kind of, this comes from this farmer family, but now he's just fairly popular yogi in Varanasi. Harsha Bhavsar, she also does a bit of astrology. I actually don't know Harsha herself. I know her, I do her boyfriend's chart, or I don't know, they're going to be married soon enough, so her husband's chart. Interesting to see USA also has Ardra. So some similarities to Canada that way with all the weight nature and the wild. And Jupiter and Ardra is going to bring, it's going to expand the scope of Ardra is what I think it's going to do. And so it expands that scope of the wilderness. Swami Lakshmanju, the Adi Guru, like my Guru's Guru, and I have a Swami, where is it? Here. You guys know who Swami Lakshmanju is? I'll just show you. Because I keep his picture. It's not a great picture, but I keep his picture on my altar kind of thing. And so you can see there's Swami Lakshmanju. So he's my Guru's Guruji, my Guruji. Anybody who's studying Kashmiri Shaivism, really, he's the guru of all of that. So like this, and in a way that was also kind of an outcast thing he did, because a lot of controversy in Varanasi, for example, because the Brahmins aren't supposed to be sharing their knowledge with outcasts, and basically any foreigner is an outcast. We're not part of their culture. We do well there because of the power of our money. The dollar does well, so we do well, but otherwise we're kind of outcasts. And so these Brahmins aren't supposed to be teaching us this secret knowledges. And Swami Lakshmanju was teaching that. And if you go to Varanasi, there's a couple, I think one of them just died actually. One of these early guys started teaching Sanskrit to foreigners, and he just wasn't allowed in temples anymore. He really lost a lot of his Brahmin friends that way. Well, it's interesting to see Fran Prashant there with Lakshmanju, because I know she studied a lot of his work. Shiv Code, also very powerful yogis here, man. Shiv Code's like full power, Lakshmanju, full power. Linda SM, I don't know how much of a yogi she is. But she's full power woman, no problem with that. Kind of runs the research department for like a surgeon or something like that. I don't know exactly what it is, but anyway, she does all the research and kind of takes care of everything for him. Ramakrishna, Paramhansa, full power yogis, man. All of them.
Yeah, I think I'm seeing, maybe you can help shed light on this. I just looked into William the Conqueror and kind of trying to figure out the Jupiter in Ardra, and it seems like it's these people went from one culture into another culture, and it was like a drastic thing. So like when you're saying the Aditi story as well, that was ringing a bell, where it's people that, and like Harrison Ford, an example, like he was a carpenter and went into acting. Like that doesn't make sense, you know? So it seems like there's a lot of, and Neil Armstrong, like an American leaving the USA, you know, like just these weird things that kind of come out. Emma Watson, like a co-lead star that became like the lead star, you know, kind of thing of the series in a way. So it's like these people went into new domains and were able to expand that in the USA too. Like they were the first brand of success of colonialism in a way, right? Like everyone else had failed in colonialism until the USA came up, and they set their own trends. So it's just interesting.
Well, they came into native lands and brought this civilization to it in a sense. Yeah. And so there's definitely a lot of that. I mentioned some of the religious conversions and things like that, but yeah, that kind of, yeah, dealing with other cultures and stepping into those other cultures that are, yeah, completely different. That's interesting. You kind of expound that on some of these other folks. Uh, Catherine the Great as well. She kind of brought that area of the world into the modern times. Jiddu Krishnamurti, he was an Indian, but he just about always worked with foreign people. So quite interesting.
And we can look at like Ram Dass, Sean Connery, Gorbachev, Angela Merkel, like all these people that kind of changed the game a little bit in a separate culture than where they came from.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Ramakrishna Paramahansa, that's like why we know yoga in a lot of ways. Um, yeah, definitely. Um, Even someone like Fran Prashant, she's uh what is she? She's German, but she moved to Italy, sort of thing, and started studying in Italy. That's kind of her new home. I mentioned how my students told me Mike Tyson has really changed his ways, sort of thing, and really working to help other people out, that kind of thing. Leonard Nimoy, of course, an alien.
Yeah,
William Shatner, they're both side by side.
yeah,
Yeah. Um,
yeah.
to go,
And Mike Tyson too, because like, initially he was just this brutal boxer.
yeah. Now you see him on YouTube once in a while, and he's like a philosopher in a sense.
And he's a mental, yeah, exactly, like he's a mental health provocative now kind of thing.
Yeah, something like
And
that.
that's where he's helping people.
Yeah, so it's yeah, very interesting that way. Well, the Star Trek to go where no man has gone before, and I think a lot of these people are kind of doing that. Um,
And I think Shatner had the first like kiss of a black female. Was that him on the
that was
TV or
him. Yeah,
something
one of
like
the
that?
first. Well, yeah, one of the first
Yeah.
black woman. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so we can, yeah, quite a bit of writing. You can see that. Um, I'll just skip ahead. We got Jupiter figured out. But there's, I think, all the placements in there. There is these shifts going on, going where you're not supposed to go, doing what you're not supposed to do, uh, which is again what makes them good researchers as well. It's like Einstein and Musk and all these guys that have Ardra placements. Little Barack Obama, the first black president of the USA. Bennett Cerf, I don't know if you know him. He started Penguin Books, and actually he started doing a lot of unique things as well with the publishing industry and copyrights and that sort of thing as well. OJ Simpson, Mick Foley. I don't think there's ever been another wrestler like this guy to go in and get himself cut up the way he was getting himself cut up. Aldous Huxley wrote books about like utopia type books in a sense. Um, I always liked one of my favorite book titles is Tomorrow, Tomorrow, Tomorrow. It was an Aldous Huxley kind of essay book. It's not great. He's got better books than that one, but I always liked the title. Helen Keller, she was this blind deaf woman that just did everything, like just blew people's minds with what she could do. The Varanasi, the Gata Astrology, he used to be a freedom fighter back in the day. I don't know just how original he is, but he is kind of like, if you're walking on the Ghats of Varanasi, especially when you're new, he'll find you and like do a little hand reading, a little offer to do your chart reading, and oh, come to my place, have some chai, I'll read all this. And he's harmless and he doesn't rip people off very much, but he's actually, well, he's almost completely lost his memory by now. It's really, really funny. So he offered his chart to me and a friend one time, and my friend was, oh, I've got an astrologer already. He took my arm. He's like, well, yeah, your astrologer, really? Yeah, you have to help me, man. You have to help me. Took me aside and gave me his chart details. And he's like, you have to help me. My life is just stressed. And he was having a lot of deaths in the family at the time, which was why he was so stressed. But Larry Rounds, he's my uncle. He's kind of kicked out of the family for being weird, I guess. So a bit of an outcast that way. But he spends a lot of his time working way up in the north. Safety guy way up in the north, that north way some way. I don't know how much he lost. I think it was over $100,000. He lost to trying to save the, what is it, the Eritrean princess that gets kidnapped, and if you just send so much money, we'll get her out and she can have access to her millions and you'll be rich. Those kind of phishing emails that they used to send out. So anyways, that was my Uncle Larry got caught up in that and spent a ton to save the princess. So I think it was actually after that he was just embarrassed, so he left the family on his own. I don't know if he's kicked out, but whole family kind of teases him pretty mercilessly. You get US and Israel independence is basically the same. Israeli constitution. Interesting that they both have Venus and Ardra, and maybe that's that show of force, that show of wildness. Thomas Clarence, I think there's been some accusation. He's a judge in the US Supreme Court, and I think he's had some accusations against him. Edward Smith Osborne, NATO commander. You get some fighters here, Sugar Ray Leonard. Pinot, I'm not sure, I can't remember. Bobby Hatfield. Bobby Hatfield is a drummer, heavy metal drummer or something. I don't know what band he was with. So so you got someone like, well, Sarah Ann, she's also a good friend of mine. Very, very, very powerful, independent women. One of these, like, well, she was a dancer. And you see these dancer yogis, they can just like bend themselves into any shape and so strong and flexible both. They can just like they can do anything. Well, very, very powerful woman. Natalie Portman, also very powerful. Oh wow, you get into the third pada with Venus, and you get Yi Sun Sun, you get a whole bunch of like military commanders, Napoleon Bonaparte, Joseph Howler, Karl Wolf, all these people were involved in the army. Military, Hulk Hogan, Clint Eastwood. You can go on YouTube and it's like kill counter videos of how many people he shoots in a movie. And it's just like nobody kills as many people as Clint Eastwood does in Hollywood. Like that kind of thing. Kerry Fox was interesting. He was an amputee who ran across Canada way back in the, it must have been in the 80s, that early 80s, I think, and to kind of raise money for war amps. And so that was kind of an interesting character. My mom here also with her Venus and Ardra, Donna H. She's also there. Well, one thing I can say about my mother, like growing up with her, we just about always lived back in the forest somewhere. We were always, it was that love for the beauty of nature. She got me into photography and a lot of nature photography, playing with mom's camera when I was young, all that kind of thing. And then she also went into the justice system. And so that's also a pretty wild place, working in the prisons and the jails with criminals and all that kind of thing. Jean-Paul Primeros, he's another like a NATO commander or something similar to that kind of thing. Jerry Garcia, Dan Aykroyd, Steve Martin, Camilla Sutton, she's another astrologer like that. Princess Diana's acupuncturist, I guess, is Onag Shanley Tofolo. So I'll just skip ahead here and we'll get to Saturn. There's some tribal stuff going on in Saturn, apparently. Arthur's always going to be a little bit wild. How much connection with, I just want to go back up here and see Venus for a second. Again. Just want to look for that connection with animals a little bit again. Met Surf started Penguin books. Because with my mom growing up with her too, we always had dogs and cats and horses, and there was always a bunch of animals kind of running around. I don't see it too much with the rest of these. My uncle has some horses. Yeah, I don't really see too much there. And please, Emmett, as you're doing your research while I'm talking, you come up with anything, please feel free to share. That's Saturn, okay. So here we get, well, one of the things, because this is Ardra's in Gemini. And so one of the things, you get some very sort of tight groups, especially when Saturn's here, almost secret society type stuff. And I know like Patricia's belongs to that, Rose McGowan's partly, Claire B. I wouldn't be surprised if Penelope Cruz also belonged to sort of a secret society. Chris C. to a certain degree, Baidava A. also. So you see a lot of like kind of like really tight, long connections with these groups, these kind of hidden, darkened groups in a sense. Wonder how much of it has to do with. Yeah, we get some black magic there. Nikola Tesla, actually, he was his lifestyle is a bit of a mystery. Nobody's really sure what he was up to. He's kind of living with the gypsies out of town. They kind of think there might have had some sort of a, like Rumi had Shams. And so Nikola Tesla, they think he also had this partner who sort of helped drive his imagination in a sense. So we see Michael Arth, Black Magic Killer, Bill Ayers, also Radical Communist Association. Portamando Saraswati. Okay, it's more of a spiritual group, but again, that sense that group binding there comes quite strong. Lauren Harris, a group of 7. If you're Canadian, you should look him up and have a look at some of his art if you don't know it. Kind of not abstract, impressionist paintings of Canada. Someone just introduced me, I can't remember the name of him. Someone just introduced me to a Russian painter. I was like, wow, all that work looks just like group of 7 stuff. Really incredible. These kind of things.
I have actually seen his stuff at the Toronto Museum.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I actually love his stuff. So, yep, spot on.
Yeah, it's really, really great stuff. Yeah. So I used to be so much into all that stuff. Yeah, and then we get like someone like D.H. Lawrence. He almost writes in the style of the group of 7 in a sense. But these kind of, his books were considered taboo. A lot of it was banned actually. You read it now and you're like, why would they ever ban any of this stuff? But it was too sexy for the day, I guess. Had women cheating on their husbands, basically, I think was the big thing. And you don't want to teach women that it's okay to cheat on their husbands. No problem for the husbands to cheat on the women, though. No, we got it good, really. So yeah, kind of a lot is almost secret society. Sleepy Eye up here too, also part of secret society. Well, he does Native American sort of sweat lodge stuff, but then he also does some ayahuasca ceremonial things and a lot of that different stuff. Like that. Looks like a lot of drugs here. Him and Eric Clapton, Mia Farrow, they're all famous for having really harsh drug addictions. Jitendra H, I don't think he has a drug addiction, but he might. He's a pretty weird dude. Like that. So yeah. Interesting. Bill Ayers with the Radical Communist Group, and then another guy, David Gilbert, same organization. Bill Ayers is the boss. David Gilbert, I think they're doing time did some time for bank robbery because well, you got to raise money somehow, I guess, for these things. Patabi Jose, he's kind of interesting, right? He's this big Guruji, but I'm almost positive he never actually wrote any of his books that have his name on them. I'm pretty sure he had like students were writing these things. And so this sort of shadowy side, you could say. Also, it wasn't easy to get into the Iyengar, especially the ashram in India. It was like you had to be doing Iyengar yoga for like at least 2 years or something like that. Like there was some protocol before you could go visit the ashram in India, that kind of thing. Susie's brother, he did some dodgy banking deals and ended up just kind of a normal dude in a way. And he did these dodgy banking deals, and he's the one that ended up holding like $100 million in debt or something like that. It's just ridiculous. Like this guy who never had any money is, and even after he still had no money, ended up with 100 million in debt with nothing to show for it. Jacques Fresco is kind of interesting. The Venus Project, that was trying to make an alternative economy. One of these guys is doing experimental village type stuff. And so again, it's a lot of this team sort of group stuff that we see coming up with this are the unusual groups, unusual sort of projects that the groups are working on, unusual bands, all of that sort of thing. Tommy Blake, I think, is another drummer. So Rahu and Ardra, Rahu goes into his own nakshatra here, so you expect it's going to be fairly strong. They generally say that Rahu also likes Gemini, and so certainly they must be very strong communicators. Marcel Proust wrote like 10 pages on the moment he was waking up, and so maybe a little bit verbose at times. Neil Young, he's famed for his songwriting. I don't know how much that theory still goes because, of course, Brett Hall, he's relating more with team side of Gemini than the writing or the communication side. But I don't know what he did after. Maybe he became a news, like a sports announcer or something like that after. I'm not sure. Jawaharlal Nehru, who's first president or prime minister of India after independence. A few here. Bach, I think, went deaf. Was that Ardra? Maybe not. Oh, here we get Hiroshima. So you get the nuclear weapons with Ardra as well. That roar. It's interesting. We still so many researchers doing rockets and working with nuclear kind of science. So it's kind of interesting to see Hiroshima down here. Also relating. Yeah, some great classical musicians here. Johann Sebastian Bach, George Frederick Handel. Really incredible. My yoga, the yoga studio in Victoria, I helped put together a few years ago. Quite an unusual place as well. And here we get some really heavy hitters. Bismarck, Caesar, William of Cambridge. Wow. St. Francis Assisi, Takshan, big gurus, even Abraham Maslow, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think. Like that. Jeff Bezos, of course. We all know him. Imram X. Kendi. I don't know which one he wrote, but he wrote one of these like White Fragility or something like that. He's a kind of a Black Lives Matter guy, I guess. Michael Arth, we've seen him earlier, child killer. Brad Pitt, Gordon Downey, you know all these guys. trying to think of Brad Pitt movies that relate with Ardra. I just remember one where he's fishing in a stream. Only one I can think of offhand. Nicolas Cage, he did some skydiving, some very risky, that adrenaline junkie. You can really see in Nicolas Cage. And that might be same with a lot of some of these military guys and warriors. It might have been the adrenaline that really led them on through all of that. Interesting, Nicolas Cage, we mentioned that. Air side, Josh Johns also worked with the Air Force, actually. He was selling American made airplanes and stuff, probably drones, I don't know exactly what, but to foreign people. So he's doing a lot of this negotiating with foreigners. I would expect some of these people, because Rahu's fascination, and so Rahu would put that fascination for those Ardra things. And so I would expect some of these people to, especially the wealthy ones, maybe they're involved in kind of protecting wild lands, this kind of thing, preserving the wilderness, this sort of thing. But of course, because it's Rahu, none of them would really see the wilderness for what it is. Someone like Michael Arth, and if we looked him up, he was burying his bodies in the jungle, the wilderness, that sort of thing. And Ketu, usually when Ketu goes into a Rahu Nakshatra or Rahu goes into a Ketu Nakshatra, I get a sense that we're going to bring balance actually to the space. And so like Ardra, there's always going to be a lot of intensity around. Maybe even like a lot of sort of greed as well, or it's like some of these others. Well, let me ask you how because we saw those other Jupiter and Ardras, everybody was sort of changing cultures and things like that. How have you experienced that in your life? Or is that maybe now moving from east to west?
You're cutting out a lot. Like the question was how I'm experiencing a K2 in Ardra.
Yeah, how's your Jupiter and Ardra? Are you seeing some of those same things? Oh, maybe I'm cutting out too much. Yeah, I must be cutting out too much.
Um, yeah, there is a lot of I'm letting go of everything basically. 100% letting go of like the culture that was behind me and really adapting a new style of being and living culturally. 100%. And I'm going into a role of like more servitude, Jupiter rather than expansion service. I don't know if that's a way to kind of see the letting go of the
Yeah,
of the way emotions used to be processed and seeing how they're going to be processed now into the future. Yeah, I think that's a very Ardra thing. I like what do you howl for kind of thing. At what point do you let that stream of emotion out going? And
yeah,
um,
yeah, you go kind of
it's kind of a like a
yeah, I think it's kind of be a lot of like pushing for that change and kind of pushing and pushing and pushing until something sort of breaks. And then you get this, you'll probably have that catharsis and you'll be like, oh, everything's gone. I lost everything. Oh, all those friends are gone. They don't want to talk to me. Oh, right. And I'm starting over. I got nothing. And so yeah, he'll hit that pretty hard. I hit that every few years.
yeah.
I don't even have ours. Um, so like this.
Well, that's because your moon's in Ardra, right? I think you're saying.
No, my moon's in Migration. I don't have any art replacements actually.
Okay.
Um, well, actually, that's not 100% true because I think. Here. So it's in my Navamsha. Mercury is an Ardra
There it is.
Navamsha. And so, yeah. So distant Ardra, but I
So, so y-
can associate with my Navamsha pretty good. Your
yeah, and your Navamsha kind of comes through. It comes through as a Rasi chart, correct?
comes through as a what chart? You're also breaking up pretty bad.
Yeah. You're when you learn when you're kind of planets and that is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Let's well, since we can't hear each other anymore, let's just wrap this up, I guess. It's not working, it's not working. Uh and we'll go on to the next one next week. I'll be in, where will I be? I'll be in small town Texas next week. So talk to you from there.
It's a place called Small Town.
No, it's called I keep forgetting the name of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah. Someone told me it's back in the hill country. Very beautiful area. So
Yeah, I get you.
yeah. So
All
that's
right.
enough for me. I'll go do my Ardra thing next week.
Oh well. We'll talk to you next week,
You
Mike.
bet. You bet, Emmett. Good, happy
Yeah, it
travels.
was a pleasure.
You bet. Bye bye.
Ciao. Thank you.